Hello everyone, welcome to the Venture Playbook Podcast by SIA. I am your host today, Marcin Kovic, joined by my colleague Mo Rashput. Today we have a great pleasure of speaking with Lory Kehoe, who is the founder and chair at Blockchain Island. Blockchain Island is an industry innovation network focused on the promotion of blockchain, crypto, and Web3 in Ireland. It was founded with the goal to establish Ireland as a global blockchain, crypto, and Web3 hub. It is a non-profit, member-led organization that includes state agencies, corporates, academics, and professionals working in the blockchain field. Lory is also an adjunct assistant professor in technology, trends, and strategic information systems at Trinity College, Dublin. It's a pleasure to have you, Lory.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Great to be here.
Perfect. Lory, it's always of great value to our audience to hear about personal stories of guests that we bring to the podcast. Could we go back in time and maybe hear about your story, how you got to be involved with blockchain? I imagine it was a very different world back when you started compared to today's ecosystem and the number of companies and opportunities that exist.
Sure. And I'd love to hear you guys, your story as well on this. But it was back in 2015, so 10 years ago, believe it or not, which is a long time in crypto. I went over to visit a friend of mine in Hong Kong who recently moved out there. And I was just asking in terms of, projects that he was working on. He was working for a big four consulting company. And he was saying that, look, he was really interested in fintech, in the payment space, and he was beginning to hear a lot more about, I guess, people looking at Bitcoin and the underlying technology, which was blockchain. So I kind of had a few questions on that, and we had a few drinks and kind of got into it a bit more. And really, it was the advantage of having some time off after that trip to Hong Kong, where I was sitting on a beach in Thailand doing nothing and getting a bit bored, to be frank. And I had enough time to start going down the rabbit hole to try and think about and research via YouTube, what is Bitcoin? What is blockchain? How does it work? So I think the importance of curiosity and downtime gives you, a chance to have a little perspective to start drilling into things that you don't, when you're back at home and you're working and it's just kind of one thing after the next. So I was really fortunate that it played out that way. I then came back to Ireland and I wrote a paper about the role blockchain technology could play in financial services. And that was the beginning of how it all happened.
Yeah, beautiful story. Maybe I can briefly answer this question and then we can continue with some follow-ups to your story. So on my end, it's really blockchain space, and my interest in it takes me back to my times at university. It was in the last final year when I was studying for my degree in business studies that me and two of my friends founded a blockchain society. And I believe this is just when blockchain was getting more global traction. So it was at the end of 2017, 18, if you remember. We were hosting a number of events, bringing speakers and just enabling networking on a much smaller scale than what you guys are doing at Blockchain Ireland. But nonetheless, it was quite an important period in my life.
I guess for me, it's more of a personal journey. So I don't have much sort of professional experience in the world of blockchain. Although last year we did do a hackathon here in our London offices with our partner Tezos, in terms of just working with some of the universities here in London and giving them a challenge, and then there were some coins for them to win towards the end. But before that, I think it was in 2018 when it was first sort of bubbling in the startup space, and this is back in the day when I was at one of the big four consultancies, and I ended up investing in Bitcoin. I mean, not lots of anything. It was just more sort of, one of the things that I was sort of social pressured into. And I was quite lucky. I ended up forgetting my Coinbase password and then finding it a couple of years later, and then it turned into a little bit more money. So my experience with blockchain is probably more on the actual user side than it is more on the sort of institutional and more professional side. So I'm still getting to grips with it. So almost
Yeah.
there.
Perfect. And Lory, if I'm correct, you also start your professional career as a management consultant. Is that correct?
I did actually. Even go back further. I was fortunate enough. I started my, I guess, career as a teaching in a college in Ireland. I was big into surfing at the time, and it allowed me to go surfing as much as I possibly could while earning some money, and also learning from the students that I was teaching. But I think I probably learned more from them than the other way around. But I was very fortunate to become part of a graduate program of one of the big consulting companies, and that was, really where I learned, I guess, how to be a business analyst, how big projects work, and really kind of how the world works in a lot of ways from a corporate perspective.
Okay. And then I imagine you founded Blockchain Ireland while still being in the consulting world. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I really, it was kind of fortunate timing. So I came back to Ireland after Hong Kong, and then I wrote the paper. And then at the time, the world's largest blockchain hackathon, because there weren't that many, so it's kind of coming from a low base. The world's largest blockchain hackathon took place in Dublin City University, and we got wind of that. We sponsored it. And that was really the kind of where a bunch of people came together that hadn't been in the same room before. So we had people who were very kind of, I guess, crypto focused, Bitcoin, maxis, and then people who were beginning to get more familiar with the underlying technology, which is blockchain, and corporates and different governmental departments. And they were all in the same room. And I think everybody sensed that, look, there's something to this. There's something more than, people being in online chats talking about Bitcoin. And so it was with one of the semi-state agencies in Ireland, which is called IDA Ireland, which is about attracting foreign direct investment to Ireland, that we set up Blockchain Ireland. And the goal was simply to put, I guess, a structure in place where different parts of, the corporate world in Ireland come together and to share their experiences on the technology. What's their understanding of it? What's the potential for it? And, how could we work together to potentially put a flag in the ground and say Ireland is open for business in this space?
Okay, perfect. And I remember when I was going through the papers, one of the paper that you guys released, there was a very nice comparison on 2015 to 2022 snapshot of Blockchain Ireland and the ecosystem you grew, which was quite impressive how things have changed in such a short period of time. So my other question is what is your current role and responsibility related to Blockchain Ireland, and what's the main key focus area right now?
Sure. I'm very fortunate. I am the chair of the board of Blockchain Ireland. So we have a steering group and a steering group lead that looks after the day-to-day activities. So would help, I guess, set strategy, would help run monthly status meetings. And then there are 6 different working groups. And so all the different working groups basically, in a decentralized way, have their own priorities as long as they feed back to the overarching kind of goals of Blockchain Ireland, which is to establish Ireland as a blockchain hub in order to create a resilient ecosystem, to try and educate people, and to try and create jobs. So my job with 3 others, we're the current directors of the board. So yeah, we oversee that strategy and I guess the execution. So that's my role as it stands, and yeah, very proud and privileged to be part of that group.
And what's the role of state agencies? How do they interact with you on day-to-day or quarterly basis? What's their input to your work?
So IDA Ireland was there at the start, which was a fantastic kind of, I guess, support mechanism in order to help bring other corporates together. Because I think one of the challenges that ecosystems have, and this can be to their detriment, is that everybody wants to own the ecosystem. Okay. And that's part of business life. If you can own the ecosystem, then there's a chance that you can do really well. You can control every part and everything rolls back to you. But when in the early days of a nascent ecosystem, if everybody wants to own it, it means that people don't play together, and it means that, things don't take off. So having a semi-state body or even a state body involved at the start helps kind of balance that out a little bit, and saying that, guys, the time will come where everybody will hopefully get a piece of the pie. But the important thing at the start is that we create the pie, we grow the pie, and then, companies can flourish and win and do all those good things. So I think it can be challenging if one company stands up and says, we want to stand this up and own it. I think you're going to get backlash from other members of the ecosystem if that occurs.
Yeah, and it's a great thing that there's a network like yours that organizations can join. If I recall correctly, one of the groups is focused on large corporates, the other on startups. But my question to you is, how do you guys or the organizations involved deal with that competitive aspect, right? Because on one hand, we want to share, we want to help one another, want to grow an ecosystem, the user base. But there's always an element of not wanting to share too much, or pushing back on certain aspect because of all the confidential commercial plans that each organization has.
Yeah, good question. I think over the 10 years, Blockchain Ireland has, continued to change, much like the market, much like everything else. And initially, we were a not-for-profit. We've now actually moved into a for-profit model, in the sense that we actually have corporate members. And in that sense, what we do is, we have a number of corporate members, from the likes of BNY to Blockdaemon to Coinbase to Binance to StoneX to CBRE, Kraken, and many others. And the model that Blockchain Ireland has, that what we're trying to do is that the big fish, the big corporates, enable us to create that ecosystem that enables the creation of the smaller fish. So how do we get big corporates to help us drive forward with podcasts, with research, and also other endeavors to help startups come up with ideas, and then to get their ideas up and running and scale them as well. So at an overarching level, we're always trying to do that. So I think the most active working group we have is our startup working group. So we've got great people in there, Fiona Delaney and Alejandro Gutierrez, who led that for some time.
Okay, so in terms of the business model that you guys follow, it's actually a membership base for big corporates, and you also do an event or a series of events. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we've been running Blockchain Ireland. I think this year will be our sixth Blockchain Ireland Summit. So that takes place on May 26th and 27th in Trinity Business School, where what we try and do is we try and bring in speakers from all across the world into Ireland to, for us to learn from them as to what's going on, not just in Ireland, but also what we try and do is then showcase some Irish companies so they get a feel as to what the ecosystem is like here in Ireland. So hopefully it kind of works both ways. We also run a video podcast series with, a number of the leaders and the pillars of the blockchain community here in Ireland. So whether it's from, Enterprise Ireland, which is a semi-state helping provide funding to startups, whether it's the Central Bank of Ireland, and also from the government CIO. So what we try and do with video podcast series is kind of bring all those people together so people can understand who those people are, what those departments do, how they can get in touch with them. And we also carry out research. So we respond to consultation papers that the government issues, and we carry out annual surveys, both on the retail side and institutional side when it comes to crypto adoption. So a flavor of some of the things that we do. Hopefully that didn't sound too much like a sales pitch.
Absolutely. And if you were to think about, some of the major milestones or challenges over the years, what would be the one or two that's worth sharing?
Look, I think hardest thing in life, isn't it? In anything is really starting. So I think huge credit goes to IDA Ireland and Keith Fingleton for really starting off Blockchain Ireland. And I was very lucky to be the person, that they got in touch with. But, that's number one. I think Blockchain Ireland Summit, the week itself, is really important. And there's a lady, Joanna Moran, that was her idea. So I think really important how that helps provide structure. And it also just provides a way for us to, as I said, kind of bring senior people to Ireland. And that then means that they meet the ecosystem, which is just massive. So if you think back to the very early days, and I'm not saying we're anything near the levels of Web Summit, but when Web Summit was set up and I was running in Dublin, you had all these massive senior leaders coming to Ireland. So then they got to see what was going on here. They got to meet other people, and it became an annual event where, it was part of their calendar. Now, Blockchain Ireland Summit is not at anywhere near that level of success, but that is kind of along the lines of what we're trying to do. How do we get it so that people, map out their calendar and they put, the end of May as to a time they come to Dublin, not only to engage the ecosystem, but meet with other senior leaders from around the world. So we've got some really high profile speakers this year, which will be released in the coming weeks. So I think there are two things, and maybe a third to finish. I think another key thing is, when a group like this comes together, it's about creating strategies. I think, and I'm sure it's the same in the UK and other parts of the world, if you're waiting for the government to always create strategies about new technologies, you're going to be waiting a long time, or you could be waiting forever. Because basically, they're not as close to what's going on as the industry itself. So we decided, look, we need to develop a strategy as to how Ireland can adopt blockchain technology. Where are things right now? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? And what's the plan moving forward so that we can really adopt it and again demonstrate that we're putting a flag in the ground. So that's actually one of the proudest things, was to create a blockchain strategy for Ireland, like with the input from across the ecosystem. So that's available on our website.
Just a quick one. So on the back of governments, Ireland being obviously part of the EU, what are your thoughts about the digital euro? That's what I think is coined to come in October this year. So, what are your thoughts on that? Is that a form of better adoption, or do you think it's, what do you think about that?
Now, I think there's, many PhDs on different strands of this topic, especially kind of what's been going on in the world over the last few years. I think at an EU level, there are all sorts of factors and reasons for this. I think one is relevance. How does the EU stay relevant in an increasingly digitized world? I think Christine Lagarde from the European Central Bank has spoken about, if we look at the payments infrastructure in the EU, there is a significant dependence on using technology companies, which are not, their HQ is not in the EU. And so I think what we're starting to see is, how does the EU start to create its own infrastructure that will be seamlessly and widely available for all of the EU member states, and that our dependence on companies that are, not born and raised out of the EU reduces. So I do think that's an important point behind it. I think another key element behind it is, offline payments. It is also trying to increase financial inclusion, and it's also trying to reduce the cost of payments. So they're all the drivers for the digital euro. I think it's going to be really interesting to see as it gets rolled out. The adoption levels. Like one of the use cases, and I asked this question, Mo, and I think it's a fair question. I asked this question recently to someone from the ECB and to the Central Bank of Ireland as to, what's the use case here? What's the application? Especially when there's no interest and digital euro won't be programmable. And they said, look, one of the things that we want to be able to do is that if you're in Ireland or you're in Spain and Portugal or Italy or whatever, if you need to make a payment, that it won't be the case that it's Revolut, let's say, in Ireland, and very popular app, and then it's another app in Spain, and you're not able to make that transfer easily. But it should be right across the EU member states, and that's a big problem to try and solve. So seamless kind of transfers that are lower cost and open to all of the whatever it is, 350 million people.
Fascinating. Guess it's more of a let's wait and see see what happens come around October.
It is, and also I think if we look at recent events when it comes to the stance that other major global players are taking. I think we're starting to see the EU starting to think more and more about how we stand on our own 2 feet. And with that, I think there's a lot of work to be done, but also there's massive opportunity. Then the question is, how does the EU start to create more startups that are going to be really impactful in this space, that are going to result in hundreds of millions of users across the EU, and they're going to be global players as well. Because at the moment, a lot of the innovation does come from the US, and we take it on here. And so we need to make that investment in the EU so it goes the other way.
Fascinating.
Speaking of use cases, you probably knew this question would be coming. We'd be really keen to hear your take on what are the top most valuable use cases of blockchain application. And maybe before that, it would be useful for parts of our audience if you could share an easy definition of blockchain for anyone who doesn't know exactly what it is.
Sure. Look, blockchain is one of those things where sometimes I think that people use it almost intentionally to confuse people because maybe they don't have a grasp of it. But ultimately, blockchain is a database technology or a network technology. Okay. So what I mean by that, it's a database where information is stored, but instead of one entity having control of that, effectively, it is a shared database. So everyone has access to it and has access to the information right from the start. So one of the most powerful things, and I think one of the things that certainly when I'm teaching in Trinity on the subject is actually demonstrating the power of blockchain technology. So what you're able to do is you're able to track a transaction and you're able to look through people's wallets as to, right, where did that originate from, all the way back to that, first transaction. Then you can follow it, from wherever it went. And that's available to everybody, right, via block explorers. So whether it's Etherscan, et cetera, using the Ethereum blockchain. And that for me is one of those kind of light bulb moments where people are able to see, wow, this is the level of, I guess, transparency and auditability that the technology brings. And I think it's one of the areas that is not fully understood or totally appreciated. And I think as a society, globally, I think we're moving more and more towards where that's going to become just more and more important, but also just become a standard when it comes to how governments are spending our tax dollars or euros or pounds. So we should be able to see that level of detail. And I think there's a growing sense in society that's needed, that's required. Like for me, there is no better technology than blockchain technology to facilitate that. So ultimately, it is a database technology. So, need to demystify that right now.
And from the corporate point of view, what would you say are the most compelling, according to your knowledge and most up-to-date discussions? What are the most compelling use cases for actually investing in, exploring, or adopting blockchain technology in 2025?
Yeah, look, for me, I think what's really top of mind right now are stablecoins. Something that definitely close to my heart. After running a stablecoin business in the UAE. I think, what are people looking for? They're looking for cheaper, faster, better ways to move money. And that's been payments and fintech, again, for the last 10 years or more. And I think stablecoins play a critical role in that. You're able to move $1 worth of USDC at any time. So you could wake up on a Sunday morning, you want to transfer $1 million or $1 billion worth of USDC to another part of the world, and you're able to do that. You don't have to wait until 9 a.m. on Monday morning, and then also that transaction, could be all complete within 5 minutes or less, and it will cost you a fraction as to what a large financial institution would cost you for that. So that, for me, hits those criteria of cheaper, better, faster. Now, of course, the devil's in the detail as to, what's the asset that you're moving and what's the network that you're moving it on in order to validate what those transaction fees are based on how busy the network is. So you've got to know a bit about that, and you've got to choose the right blockchain to make sure that you're getting good value for money. But largely, I think it meets those criteria of cheaper, better, faster. And so that's why we're seeing the likes of the CEO of Bank of America pretty much say they're issuing a stablecoin this year. We've seen Standard Chartered get fully behind it. And also, I think, Stripe buying Bridge for, what was that, 1.2 billion is a clear indicator as one of the largest, payments orchestrators in the world, firmly seeing that, there's a real opportunity for them to use stablecoins as part of their business. So for me, I think right now, and maybe the last piece in the US, stablecoin regulation coming in, I think that is, that provides a strong argument for lots of people getting involved in those.
Yeah, and I think also research clearly indicates that it is still the case that financial services is the sector that benefits or captures the most of the value of blockchain currently. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think there's still a lot of people interested in trading, and you can't stop that, right? And I think when people think of crypto, they think of trading and speculative purposes. And I do think that is a massive area. But what we're going to start to see more and more and more via stablecoins will be stablecoins being used as by treasurers, right? By people who are running treasuries. If you're running a treasury department and you're moving money internally or externally, and it's taking time and it's costing a lot of money, you're always on the hunt for how can we do this cheaper, better, faster. And I think they're now becoming a lot more familiar at that treasury level as to the role stablecoins can play. So we're going to see, I think, a lot more of treasury departments from large institutions, not just banks, start to embrace stablecoins. And then also what you'll start to see is, well, they'll start learning that you're able to earn interest on some stablecoins. So then not only does it, take you less time to move your money, it's also cheaper, but then also by holding that asset, you're able to earn yield on it. So then that brings up further opportunities as well. And that's obviously at a retail and a corporate and institutional level. But I think we're going to start to see a lot of corporates look at stablecoins in terms of money transfers globally.
And one question we typically ask our guests is about their definition of innovation. Innovation is one of those words that everyone knows it, but not everyone aligns of what it actually means. So we'd be really keen to hear how you define innovation and what is innovation in blockchain.
Wow. Okay. You guys definitely aren't asking the easy questions, but it's so, yeah, look, I guess there's different forms of innovation, and, very much leaning on, Professor Clayton Christensen from Harvard, right? So he talks about incremental innovation versus disruptive innovation. And incremental innovation is all about adding another razor blade to your, Gillette razor that you used to shave with. And I don't know how many razor blades we're up to now, but if in doubt, add a razor blade, right? Or if in doubt, add a camera kind of scenario. Versus disruptive innovation, where we see, I guess from a blockchain perspective, you could argue that the whole thing is disruptive. But for me, I think decentralized finance is, firmly in that category as to being really disruptive. And what I mean by that is, and what is decentralized finance? I think a very strong example is with a company called Aave, where you have, crypto, or you have a certain amount of Ether. You're able to connect your wallet to their platform, to the Aave platform or protocol. And then let's say you've got $1,000 worth of Ether. You can then lend that out and earn interest, or you can borrow against it. And this can all be done within about 2 minutes without going through a central credit register. So when I'm teaching a course on crypto, the DeFi component, I spend just basically 4 days. First day is theory, second day is applications, third day is all hands-on activities, and fourth day is policy. And on the third day, the hands-on component is when I kind of see the light bulb moment in a lot of people, whether they're coming from regulators or from governmental departments. Once they see firsthand that this is how fast they can borrow or lend without going through a central credit register, I think they're starting to see the absolute power that, blockchain can play, that crypto can play. And it's not something that will happen in 10 years or 5 years. It's happening right now. So for me, I think we're going to start to see a lot more about decentralized finance or DeFi as more and more people start to become familiar with it. I think there's a lot of work to do on the education side. But certainly from speaking with financial institutions and working in one of the past in BNY, I think DeFi is an area that is a significant opportunity and a threat.
And thinking about the future, do you see a world in 10, 20 years where, digital currencies, whether it's central bank digital currency or other cryptocurrencies, is just the standard? And the reason I'm asking is, I think blockchain is one of those new technologies that really, goes up and down. The hype goes up and then something happens. 2013, Thailand, China banning cryptocurrencies. 2018, I think it was Google, Twitter, or Facebook that banned cryptocurrency advertising, right? And also, obviously, in 2022, there was the collapse of the FTX exchange and arrest of Sam Bankman. So, yeah, what do you think the future long term is? Will we all be using central bank digital currencies?
Answering the last question first, I think people, using central bank digital currencies will become commonplace, right? I don't think it's a case of people won't use stablecoins or won't use crypto, not just use a digital euro or a digital pound, digital dollar. It'll be interchangeable. People will use them. They'll provide some specific tools or methods. And also what we'll start to see, I think, with the digital euros, that they will play some kind of anchor type role. And then on top of that, there'll be specific things that citizens can do with their digital euro that, other assets aren't able to do, as the case may be. So I think that's, I think that's the case on the digital euro. But more broadly, if we look at the adoption rate of crypto and the outlook by kind of Gen Z of crypto versus stock, I think a huge statistic came out that it was like 75% of Gen Z or Gen Z are more likely to own crypto than stock. So if that's where we are now and where we are at the pace of change that we're running at, and innovation within the space, and that is only set to continue, I think we're just going to see crypto just become more and more and more commonplace. It'll become, at points, probably a bit boring. And there's no harm in that, by the way. And it will just continue to innovate. So I think, the ability to get a loan and via, DeFi platforms and stuff like that, I think that will become more and more common because, it's going back to that key thing. Is it cheaper, better, faster than alternatives? And if it is one or two or even three of those things, customers are going to gravitate towards that because it's going to help them, do what they need to do, live their daily lives, get access to the products that they want. So I think the opportunity there for, the crypto community is to continue to educate as to what these, platforms, protocols, tools are, and how people can easily use them, and then also use them safely so that they're not getting, I guess, open to scams and things like that. So for me, I think crypto has and blockchain and Web3 is an incredibly bright future. I think there's work to be done in terms of education and also regulation. But I think we're in a pretty important point now with what's going on in the US, with what's going on in the UK and in the EU and other parts of the world in terms of, I guess, adoption, regulation, and so forth.
Lory, I have to ask, on this adoption journey of blockchain as a technology and everything you just described there, I have to ask your opinion of meme coins, right? Is that a form of better adoption in a really weird form, or is it working against the sort of journey that we're trying to get towards?
Look, what do I say? I think we have to kind of zoom out and look at this. Like, I think we go back, we had DeFi summer, which was, people started getting interested in this area who were in the crypto space. Then we had NFTs in a lot of ways. What value did they play? Then I guess meme coins coming along as well. And look, I think there's pros and cons to this. Pro is that people get an opportunity to understand the technology, an appreciation how to create meme coins, how to interact with the various protocols and what the differences are. Obviously, Solana doing incredibly well in order to make it easy for users to create these in a cost-effective manner. And then, I guess where the challenge is with meme coins is the speculation piece. So I think what you don't want to have is, significant information asymmetries taking place at a retail level where people who aren't in the know as to what all these various, I guess, these crypto assets are, and then they're making significant purchases, which are extremely high risk, and then not fully appreciating what's going on. So that's the balance that needs to take place, and I think that's on all of us in the blockchain community to help provide that level of understanding as to what these different applications and use cases are, and how they can be used. So then, I guess, especially the retail market is fully informed. And this is kind of part of that overall financial literacy plan, which I think crypto should be part of. These are these various assets. This is what they do. And these are the kind of risks and the pros and cons to them. And then people can make an informed choice after that. I think, if there's a wild meme coin that comes out and people are chasing it, that typically doesn't end in great outcomes for the broad retail market.
Yeah, for sure. I had to ask, knowing that you spent a decade in the space, that I thought, I've got my opportunity, I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, look, I think this is something that's come up as well. I think spending a decade in the space at the start, 10 years ago, I probably knew quite a lot relative to other people. But let me say, that was short-lived, because what has happened now is because there are so many strands of blockchain and crypto and Web3 and so many pillars or areas or use cases, I find it impossible to know. You can't know everything about everything. And so what you have now are deep experts in meme coins, deep experts in NFTs, deep experts in DeFi. And I think depending on the area that you're really interested in, you got to find those people or group of people who are real specialists in those areas or experts. And then, they're the people that you want to stay close to for those specific things. Because it's gotten so broad and it's an industry now rather than, perhaps a very niche sector as to where it was back in 2015.
That's a good advice.
Perfect. Lory, before we finish today's podcast, I need to ask whether A, you have any particular message to the people listening to our podcast, or two, if you wanted to share what's the best way to get in touch with you if anyone wanted to learn more about your blockchain island.
Sure. Look, I think number one is definitely education. So I think through podcasts like these, hopefully I've been able to share or shed a little light on the subject, but also following the other leaders that you have on here, I think is absolutely critical, and learning from you guys. So education in this space is just absolutely paramount. And that is an ongoing thing. So there isn't a day that goes by that I don't learn something 100%. And that's going to be the case, I think, for as long as this industry keeps going, because that's the pace of change that it moves at. So I think that's number one. I think number two is that I'd say it's definitely to try and, move from reading to doing. So how do you get your hands dirty by, understanding and playing with the blockchain? If you're interested more in the crypto side that you purchased, could be £5 or $5 worth. And then you're understanding as to, what's the process to go through KYC with an exchange. And then also, can I stake that? What does staking mean? Can I participate in a DeFi protocol with that? And you're able to see a little bit more firsthand as to what is going on behind the scenes in the area and why people are so excited by it. So that for me, I think is the second piece. So stay up to speed in terms of well-read, get your hands dirty, and just, continue to stay curious. On the last piece or the last question, So yeah, best place is through LinkedIn. So it's just, Lory Kehoe, my first name, surname. You'll find me if you search that. I probably spent too much time on LinkedIn, but would love to, people want to get in touch. I'd be delighted to respond and help out in any way I can.
Yeah, I'm glad you spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Otherwise, this might not have happened. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Lory, for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure. And thanks everyone for listening to the Venture Playbook podcast by SIA.